I'm not sure how many of you tried all the different signature selections last night, but it was a little hard for me to get up this morning. So, welcome to Alumni Weekend 2018. I'm Matt Thompson, class of 96, and I serve as the Alumni Association Board President. Today, I'm pleased, honored, to kick off the Ideas at Pomona Speaker Series, featuring 4 Blaisdell Distinguished Alumni Award winners: Rosalynn Chow, Bernard Chan, Cruz Reynoso, and Esther Brimmer. The Blaisdell Distinguished Alumni Award honors alumni whose achievement in their lives stands out, whose contributions in their endeavors mark them as distinguished persons, even among the esteemed body of Pomona alumni. These are individuals who have carried the spirit of the college into the rest of the world and lived up to the James Blaisdell quotation inscribed in the gates: "They only are loyal to the college who, departing, bear their added riches in trust for mankind." Before our 3 in-person presentations, I'd like to take a moment to honor our first award winner, Rosalynn Chow, class of 1978. I had a slide before of showing her picture, but I'm going to have to do justice with the text. You have to use your imagination. But if you go to page 30, you can, of the larger program, you can actually see her photo there. But as I talk about her, I have a feeling you're all going to recognize her from your memories. Rosalynn Chow is a highly successful TV, film, and theater actress. She was discovered at the age of 5 by local theater producers in her parents' restaurant near Disneyland. Chow has been a trailblazer in getting more Asian Americans into the media. Chow attended Pomona College and completed a degree in broadcast journalism at USC. While it was her hope to attend an alumni weekend, Rosalynn is just concluding a show in London at the Royal Academy and couldn't attend. As I was corresponding with Rosalynn, she offered several words. But before I do that, I want to talk to you what my slide would have looked like. As growing up as an Asian American in the Midwest in, I don't know when I grew up there, probably 90s, you would rarely see Asian Americans on television. But I remember looking back and watching MASH, and there was, there's some Asian actresses on that, and she was Corporal Klinger's wife on that show. So if you've ever watched MASH or after MASH, she was predominant on that show. And after MASH, she had the distinguished honor of being the first Asian American lead in a television program. Who here is a Trekkie? She was in 22 episodes of Star Trek and Star Trek Discovery, and she played really good roles in Star Trek. But what's an amazing fact is there's a huge movie coming out, a huge Hollywood movie coming out celebrating Asians and Asian Americans in media. It's called Crazy Rich Asians. I'm dying to watch this movie because I read all 3 books. They're sort of rom-coms, so I'm a little embarrassed to say I like it, but there's such a shortage of Asian Americans in media that I just love reading about them. My wife's Singaporean, my mother's Indonesian. I love hearing about this. And one of the taglines about this movie is, this is the first major Hollywood film in 25 years to feature an Asian American cast. The first movie 25 years ago that featured an Asian American cast, which was a big Hollywood, relatively large Hollywood budget movie, was The Joy Luck Club. Who's seen The Joy Luck Club? So Rosalynn Chow was one of the 4 main characters. She actually played the role of Rose in The Joy Luck Club. And that's just an amazing movie that set the stage for Asian Americans to get more representation in media today. It's sort of interesting as we come full circle. There's going to be a Claremont and Entertainment media panel at 1 o'clock, and some of these people that make these major motion pictures are of Asian American background. So some of her legacy bleeds on into that. So as I got to know Rosalynn virtually via email, she gave these kind words because she wasn't able to attend in person. I'll read it. And I really liked the way she sent her email because it sounded like her voice. I don't know her, but from seeing her on television and her advocacy, I sort of know what she talks like. But this sounds like I envision her speaking it. I have been in London for 4 months, starring in a play at the National Theatre of Great Britain. The play is called The Great Wave. It was a dream come true to work at this theatre, home to many great actors, from Peter O'Toole to Judi Dench and Benedict Cumberbatch. This was also one of the scariest things I've ever done, moving to London, performing in a British accent with British actors for British audiences. It was intimidating, to say the least. But in the end, it was also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. More recently, I have been in a number of TV shows like Blackish and a Netflix show called The OA. I also wrapped a film called Plus One, which is coming out, and been recurring on a show called Code Black on CBS. The only theater project I was involved at Pomona was also my most exciting experience at Pomona. Leonard Pronko, the renowned kabuki expert, staged a production depicting the Revolutionary War in kabuki style. It was, well, revolutionary. I came to Pomona as an extremely unprepared young 16-year-old. I graduated high school early and came straight to Pomona from an all-girls Catholic school. It was tough at first, socially, but I found comfort in my classes. My freshman year drama teacher at Pomona was the first person to cast me in a scene that was non-ethnic. I had been working on and off before then as a child actor. I still remember the scene was from the play Billy Liar. The professor wrote in my grade book that he felt that I showed real promise as an actor. It was the first time that I felt acting could be a possibility for my future. 140 IMDb credits later, that's quite an accomplishment. I also asked Rosalynn about Asian American representation in the media. And she said, diversity ebbs and flows in the media. However, yes, I'm very involved in speaking to students about the importance of colorblind casting reflecting the world we live in, and also the importance of the Asian American community being vocal and supportive toward their fellow artists. Please join me in applauding her receipt of this award. Turning now to our second recipient of the Blaisdell Distinguished Award, Bernard Chan, class of 1988. I've met Bernie several times, and I've watched him via Facebook and LinkedIn. I feel like I know him through those virtual means. His accomplishments in business and the public sectors are exceptional, to say the least. I don't know how he has time for all this cross-border chairmanships. I'm tired just watching him all his international flights. The only person I think that flies more to Pomona internationally is Pete Sasaki. I see him on international flights as well. He's also a great friend of the college, mentoring students and serving on the board of trustees. So here's a little tidbit. Bernie flew in, I assume, from Hong Kong last night in LAX, assume a red eye, and I saw him in the line at breakfast at the hotel. That's a tall order for anyone. But he was meeting with a student. He was meeting with a student to talk about her career. That's amazing in the sense that to fly red eye, meet with a student, and then come back for this. So real testament to his love of the college. Bernie is a deputy to the National People's Congress of China, a non-official member of Hong Kong's Executive Council, and the convener of the non-official members of the Executive Council. Effectively, from my perspective, this seems like the Hong Kong equivalent of the US cabinet, or maybe the cabinet 4 or 5 years ago. He's also a former member of Hong Kong's Legislative Council. An art major at Pomona, he is the president of Asia Financial Holdings and Asia Insurance. He is chairman of the Hong Kong Thailand Business Council and an advisor to Bangkok Bank. He sits on the boards of several local and overseas companies in the financial services and manufacturing sectors. He also joined the governing board of the Alibaba Entrepreneurs Fund. One of the pictures I saw of Bernie was him on the same panel with Jack Ma, who's basically the Jack Bezos of China, helping entrepreneurs in Hong Kong, so that's very impressive. Chan is also active in public service, particularly with organizations committed to environmental and cultural causes in Hong Kong. Today, Bernie is joined by Pomona Professor of Economics Stephen Marks, I had Stephen for intermediate micro about 23 years ago, so it's an honor to be introducing him today. Professor Marks is an expert in Asian political economy with a special interest in Indonesia's trade, regulator policies, law, and economics. He teaches courses at Pomona on international relations, microeconomics, and is the coordinator of the IR program here. He received his BA from the University of Michigan and his PhD from Princeton. Their conversation, entitled The Business World and Social Cohesion, the Big Test for Corporate Engagement, will investigate the role and responsibility of for-profit corporations in society. Please join me in welcoming our guests.
Bernie, first I congratulate you on your honor today. I also wanted to say that although I was the teacher and you were the student, you have been a wonderful tour guide for me in my lifetime. I've learned a lot from you over the years about courage, perseverance, and good humor in the face of daunting odds. I've also learned about grace and generosity of spirit. I've also learned from you that I really do not like eating chicken feet that much. Although, in a pinch, I can choke down a turtle soup. So, we can agree that the capitalist motif runs strong in the United States and in China, and Hong Kong in particular, and capitalism arguably provides strong incentives for a variety of productive activities, but it does not necessarily guarantee equality of opportunity or the production of public goods. And I gather that you believe business can play a positive role in an economically divided society. So based on your experience in Hong Kong, what does corporate responsibility consist of, and can it be profitable?
Thank you, Steve. First of all, I'd like to, in fact, before coming out, I told Matthew Estes, my classmate, that I still record a course that I took from you, statistic. You might not remember, but I do very, very much so, because I got a D from Steve. I think that's the only D I ever got from Pomona. Thank you. So finally, I got a chance 30 years later to tell you in your face. But I have to say that we've been good friends for a long time. Thank you. Back to the question you asked. Well, so those of you who know Hong Kong, we are by far the most capitalist city in the world. We adapt this, the model, the capitalist model, and just like anywhere in the world now, capitalist model in the world, we're faced with a huge challenge. Increasingly, we have a huge income gap. For young people, there is an issue with upward mobility, housing affordability. So all the issues that San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Sydney of the world face, we have that all. And you can imagine why people are so upset. They feel that they didn't have a chance. Now, but coupled with that, of course, Hong Kong uniquely now part of China. And there you are. If the same question asked 30 years ago, it's a non-starter, because 30 years ago, we don't really have to worry about China. But today, China is a whole different world. So we bring in now 1 billion people to compete with us. So it's no longer just minding our own business. And how are we going to? Because we are in a globalized world. We're competing with them, and we are at the footstep to China too. So, and this is a huge challenge for our society. So how do we address that? And business, for the longest time, tends to think that, well, that's not my problem. We make money. We are only accountable to shareholders. We're maximizing the value, the return. And then, of course, we pay tax. And from tax, we'll leave the government to deal with it. But the trouble is, government cannot deal with all these issues, because most of those issues are, in the first place, created by business. I'm from business. I have to admit that much of those social issues are caused by us. So I think we finally get it, that no longer that we can just count on government to address all the issues. Business themselves as well, business and government together, and of course with the NGOs. It's a tripartite relationship. We need all three parties to address this crisis that we're facing with. Of course, some accuse the business doing this just for show, for PR. Maybe they are, but my answer to that is, well, it's better than nothing.
Right.
Now, but I think more often now they feel that this is not just a PR, because it starts hurting them too. Especially in terms of talents recruitments. Mm-hmm. It may not happen in the last generation, not in our generation, but for the younger recruits, they do look at responsible employers. This is the concept still very new to my part of the world. But increasingly, I think the younger people, they have more choices. So they will choose corporate with a purpose. And the other thing too is so CSR is already a very embedded concept. But increasingly now, at least in the last couple of years, this concept of shared value, I guess thanks to Professor Porter and Kramer, they came up with this whole shared value concept that I think now business start to look at not just making money, but making money with solving a social issues. So we start to see that happen, but although I must say that concept is still very new, how you can, ideally is you make profit, yet you're doing social good. Still something a bit, I have to say that's still a minority, but it's coming because I think increasingly, as I said again, they realize that it's not a zero-sum game. So we'll try to find a win-win-win solution.
I remember years ago that Cathay Pacific announced in a newspaper advertisement that it was especially looking for women pilots, and I thought maybe this is an instance in which corporate social responsibility and the profit motive run in line, because I suspect the airline would have gotten new women pilots at a discount relative to men.
I'm pretty sure, the flight I took coming was Cathay Pacific, and I'm pretty sure that was a women pilot in the cockpit too, yes.
So arguably an efficient and transparent legal system can provide an important foundation for responsible corporate behavior. I was impressed by a South China Morning Post article that you wrote several weeks ago in which you really underlined the importance of the rule of law for Hong Kong. Given its history, Hong Kong is a distinctive amalgam of Western traditions and Eastern traditions. How much popular support is there for an abstract concept like the rule of law in Hong Kong?
Oh, it's huge. I don't know how many of you actually been to Hong Kong. How many of you been to Hong Kong ever? Wow, I'm impressed. Wow. So now let me tell you, 20-some years ago, Hong Kong been returned to China exactly 21 years now, 1997. Back in 97, we were told, Hong Kong people like myself, we've been told that we'll be given a 50 years unchanged of lifestyle. And the rule of law will continue to stay. The Hong Kong style rule of law will stay and for 50 years. Now, that's 20-some years ago, right? Well, the entire arrangement was started even maybe 40 years ago. And so now 20 years pass. Let me tell you, it's not the same thing anymore. I'm sure some of you might think, it's China asserting more influence on us. Yes, they do, but in a positive way. Why? As I said again, 20-some years ago, like myself including, we don't think much of China. We think that, they're so far behind us. So, and we're giving 50 years unchanged, right? So, and I was 32 at the time. So I said, 32 plus 50, I'm going to be 82 if I'm still around. So why should I care? Why should I worry about what's going to happen 50 years later? Well, now we passed 20. Not just even about you. You can imagine anyone, right? Those who knows China enough will tell you today that there's not going to be 30 years to wait. Why 50? I don't even know why it was 50 at the time. I guess maybe at the time the leaders in China thought it would take 50 years for them to catch up with the world. 20 years pass, you and I know it's no longer 50, 30 we're talking about. The question is it's going to be next 5 or next 10, right? So we are all caught by surprise. We're not prepared for that. We thought that integration would take, we're not going to be my generation. We thought that integration would be, somewhere in the future. But the fact that they have, as China is amazing. In 30 years' time, in their 30 years' time, they have eradicated something like 30 million people from poverty. Nowhere else in the world have done that. They have caught up with the rest. They're still not quite there yet, but thank goodness they're not there yet, so we still have a room. But so increasingly, we now have this identity crisis in Hong Kong. We used to think we are so much more superior. But today we ask ourselves, are we just another city in China? How are we going to stay competitive? And we all agree in Hong Kong, there is only one piece of asset that distinguishes us from the rest of China, and that is the rule of law. So the answer to big circle back to your question is, yes, we all agree the rule of law is so important. It's not just for us, but for the international audience, because they still believe in our system. Because as China continues to invest overseas, and they increasingly doing joint ventures with overseas partners, many of the partners do not want to be based in the law to base in China, because the fear of the uncertainty. So they all prefer that these joint ventures are based with the Hong Kong law. And so the rule of law is the one piece of our huge advantage that China also wants. This is the way how China wants to engage with the world too. So they see Hong Kong as a huge asset to them. I've often been asked too, it's like, well, what's going to happen 30 years later? Will Hong Kong still be Hong Kong? And I can tell you, I said this publicly before, so it's not like I'm making a exception here, is that if the piece, the whole thing is called a one country, two system, right? This whole arrangement is called a one country, two system, because we have two separate systems in. So I said this publicly once, actually more than once, maybe 2 times. I said, if the two system, one country, two system, 30 years later, we're promised that this two system will remain until 2047, right? 2047. So by 2047, if this two system is only going to be just good for Hong Kong, right? Because when we were promised 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, we were promised that the lifestyle, everything will remain until 2047. But what happened after 2047? Nobody knows, because they never mentioned, right? I guess back then the leader thought was too far ahead. We just say 50 years. So my answer to that today is by 2047. And oh, by the way, why is the two system? Well, because people are worried. They don't want to deal with the communists. They worry about China. So this is a promise to the Hong Kong people that our lifestyle will remain, right? So now I said, by 2047, if these so-called two system is still just going to be good for Hong Kong people, then I guarantee you that will be the end, right? Because when the whole thing designed 20, 30 years ago, China is a different China. So 30 years later, if this two system is still just good for Hong Kong, we're finished. But however, if this two system is equally as good for the 1 billion, 1.3 billion China, then this will stay on. And today, I tell you, that two system is good for them. This is the way how China uses it to engage the world. They come to Hong Kong, the rule of law is a major piece of it. Because for China to change overnight for the 1.3 billion is not easy. But they can come to Hong Kong. So most of the Chinese company, when they invest overseas, they use Hong Kong as a vehicle, especially because of the law. Now, one more piece of information that you'll be very surprised, even most Hong Kong people do not know. So you may have the privilege today because you come at 9 a.m. So this is one thing, the take-home value that you have. Our Supreme Court in Hong Kong, the equivalent, which is called the Court of Final Appeal, is equivalent to your Supreme Court. We have 3 permanent judges and 15 non-permanent judges. Why non-permanent? Because they will be invited to adjudicate on specific case. So 15 non-permanent and 3 permanent. Out of the 15 non-permanent, only 3 are local. 12 are all from overseas, from the international common law jurisdictions. And among the 3 permanent judges, 2 are not Chinese. So in other words, 2/3 of the judges on the bench are not even local. So I know we often being say, well, are we going to be compromised with the Chinese, the communists? You kidding me? Most of the judges are not even local. In fact, the Chinese government are not happy too, because they say, well, because they have no control to the court, because the court are purely independent, and they adjudicate based on the law. So this is the one piece. I took a long time to answer your question. Is that this is the one piece that make us so uniquely different than, say, China. And I think so Hong Kong people wholeheartedly, although we're not necessarily always happy with how the decision is. By the way, we compete with Singapore all the time. And Singapore always, my wife's from Singapore, so I'm trying not to be too biased. But I always, because we always compete and they trash us and saying, oh, their court are being very compromised now. I said, you kidding me? In Singapore, you can never take the government to court. You'll never win. In Hong Kong, we have often been taken to court, and we lose a few times already. So this should tell you how independent our system is.
Bernie, earlier you mentioned some of the deep divisions in prosperity in Hong Kong these days. In the United States, there has been widespread and perhaps even growing distrust of the role of government. And I think a lot of that has centered around the role of government in redistribution of income and wealth. Could you provide us with some sense of how the Hong Kong government views social safety net and other programs, interventions in education and health and so on?
We have a very good social network, a safety net as well. Virtually a universal health care, because the public hospital, you pay nothing for the public hospital. Of course, the question is it sustainable? That's a big question, because as we continue to age, Hong Kong's ranked number 3 in terms of aging population in Asia. Japan number 1. Actually we advanced to 2. Japan is number 1. Hong Kong's number 2. China is coming up too. I think it's number 4. So the question, not today, but given another 15, 20 years, can we continue to afford it? We have universal coverage. Education is largely also heavily subsidized. So everything seems to be okay in that sense. But however, again, back to this whole income gap and inequality. And we often been accused, government like everywhere else, we've been often accused with collusion with private sector, especially developers. Hong Kong's biggest problem is housing affordability. And about 50% of our people live in public housing, subsidized housing, because you just can't afford to buy privately. And the other 50% in the private sector. And increasingly now, thanks to the last 10 years of QE, and now housing is so unaffordable. And the public accuse the government for not doing anything and yielding to the developers, the private sector. I know back in 2008, to most Americans, maybe bankers are the bad guy. For Hong Kong, it's always the developers, because they control so many things. It's not only they control the land supply, but they also control what's on top of the land supply, because they being the developers, they also control from utilities to service providers to you name it, the whole chain. It's like a conglomerate. So the government is in a tough position, because at the same time they have to sort of adopt the laissez-faire, because it's private sector at work. But then the private sector is just a dominant player. So what should we do with it? Unlike China, China is a very interesting model. They call this the socialist model, the Chinese way. And what exactly that mean? In fact, by the way, I don't call them socialists at all. They are very capitalist. But yet, that invisible hand is there. They will not allow the private sector to take advantage of the citizens. If when it's get out of hand, that invisible hand will come in. But we cannot do that in Hong Kong because we practice the laissez-faire model. So we have to let the private sector work. When this is where the problem is now, it's so out of control that we don't know what to do with it. Now currently the latest crisis we face with the land supply issue. And the developer owns all the land and they won't release it. So one of the suggestions is to resume the land. Government's going to resume the land. I guess we could, but once we do that, we're going to get ourselves in trouble because that means that arguably we can resume any land we want for public interest, right? So where do you draw that line with public interest? So there's a big issue. But I bet you in China they can possibly do that because in the name of public interest they can, because they have to make sure that the country is stable, because you cannot imagine when people are so upset they'll go to the streets. So in China their model is slightly very different, but in Hong Kong we adopt the whole free market model, which I think honestly has a problem itself. And we always assume that when business do well it will trickle down, but today it's so true that's not true. It doesn't trickle down. The wealth stays at the top. It doesn't get to the people at the bottom. So when the economies do well, we continue to have 4-5% growth every year. But then if you ask the man on the streets, their paycheck stays the same. So that growing discontent is becoming a huge issue for us. So how do we continue to adopt private sector model, business model, yet how to address the mass? So far we are okay because we are throwing money into our welfare system, the education system, and so on to keep people happy. But the question is, can this be sustainable in the long run with the aging population?
A few years ago I was struck visiting Singapore to learn that actually the government of Singapore owns all the land in the country.
That's a different model from us.
Yeah, that's a very different model, and I guess it may be a tribute to their governance that is sustainable without without the undermining of property rights and all that in that country. So finally, maybe if I could just circle back to your original points about corporate responsibility. Do consumers have much of a say in terms of how corporate policies are set? And I remember years ago we played volleyball on a beach on an island in Hong Kong, but we had to spend about half an hour cleaning the litter off the beach before we could even play the game. And I have the feeling that maybe some of your environmental sensibilities were born in those sorts of experiences. I think I remember you were behind anti-plastic bag campaigns in Hong Kong. So if you could comment a little bit on consumer protection and environmental matters.
Well, we came a long way. I have to say, it's far from perfect. I was the chair for the Council for Sustainable Development for a number of years. I think thanks to social media and the access to information, I think people now, the consumer knowledge is far better, far more advanced, and there are many consumer groups in Hong Kong that speak out on these sort of issues. So I think it's coming along, but of course, for the rest of Asia, it's still a bit of way to go. I think I must agree. It's never easy to strike that balance. One of the issues that we also face in Hong Kong, by the way, I'm going to divest the subject a bit. I was in charge of garbage for a while. I was in charge of garbage for 2 years, but you'd be surprised. It's just a simple thing, but yet, where do you think we deal with our trash? Right? Where do you think we deal with our trash? We have a small city, we're in a few islands and so on. Where do you think we deal with it? Well, first of all, it's a combination of all those, right? Supposedly, but we're supposed to have built an incinerator, right? Because apparently in most other cities, like Singapore, Taipei, New York City, some form of incineration. Japan is all incineration, right? But in Hong Kong, Well, we have this not in my backyard thing, because we never can agree in which location we build the incinerator, because no one would agree to, because they're so worried about not so much about the emission of the whatever from the incinerator, it's about the property value. Because they're so worried that when you put an incinerator there, and then it will affect the value of the property nearby, and property value is a huge thing in Hong Kong. So we never agree, so we never built an incinerator. So far, we put it in the so-called landfill. We dump it in the landfill. Well, the trouble is, after 20-some years, all our landfill are peaking. So we only have 5 years left. This is actually happening right now. We still have only 5 years left. And we have no solution yet, because we haven't figured out either we extend the landfill, right? But there's very little room we can extend. We have yet built the incinerator, right? The third answer to that, which is what I was involved with, is to come up with a charging scheme to charge people so that we can induce them to waste less, right? But of course, that's a whole argument. Like, why should I pay for it, the trash? But unlike in America, where you can just put it in your bin outdoor and we can collect them. But in Hong Kong, we all live vertical. Our average building size is 40 stories high. So how do we collect them? How do we charge them? I can spend an hour on that, so I'll spare you. If you want to know, do it offline with me. Huge nightmare. How do we even charge them to pay for it? But guess what? To make things even more challenging for us is, well, where do you think these 3 landfills are? What do you think these 3 landfills that we've put our trash in, where do you think they are? You don't have to know Hong Kong, but you can figure out where should they be. Put it this way, far away from us, right? We put them far away, right? As far as we possibly can find them, so we don't see them, we don't smell them, right? But where are they? Where are they? Where when you? At the China border, right? We're further away. Well, that's great 30 years ago. Today, well, who's on the other side of the border?
China.
Well, it's a city called Shenzhen. Shenzhen 30 years ago, fishing village. Nobody cares. We put all our trash nearby. Today, Shenzhen, the GDP just passed Hong Kong. They're the Silicon Valley of China, right? I have 7.5 million population. They have 15 million people, right? So I guess what? The head of Shenzhen government call our government and say, what the hell are you doing? You're putting the trash right in front of us. Because for us, we are far away from there. It's the downtown of Shenzhen. It's right across. So when it comes to environment, there's no border. There's no border. So we have to figure out how to solve this problem together. But again, 30 years ago, when the last time you came to, well, not 30 years ago, but 20-some years ago, when you came to visit me, we think that, well, we just keep the problem away from us, we'll be okay. By the way, I asked someone in New York City, how do you deal with your problem? You know what the answer was? At least that's what I was told. Where do you think the New Yorker put their trash? New Jersey. Close, Staten Island. Away from Manhattan.
Right.
So anyway, it's a global issues, and we all have to figure out a way to do it, because we all live in this place.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. Yes.
We have microphones, so someone will bring you the microphone.
Can I not have a tough question from my own class?
Yeah, hi, Bernie. Aiden Hale, class of '88. So, as you know, trade tensions between the U.S. and China have been escalating, and one of the major complaints is protection of intellectual property. So, I'm curious if you have any thoughts, given that you're emphasizing that Hong Kong's role to play could be instituting the rule of law. Is there a way that the U.S. could use Hong Kong as sort of a vehicle to still have production and manufacturing done in China, but to have protection of intellectual property? So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that topic.
You know, Matt mentioned that I had breakfast with a student this morning, and I told the student, Linda over there, I told her, I said, listen, as a politician, the trouble is everyone assumes that you know every answer to every question. So, and here is one of them. No, but seriously, well, in fact, the international, intellectual property is a big thing. And that's why many of these joint ventures are based out in Hong Kong, because we have a better IP protection, right? It's exactly for that reason. Now, but to be very honest with you, there is the IP protection, right? But then at the same time, depends on the trade you're in say more in the innovative stuff. Honestly, China is today, they're moving so fast, and people start to actually even care about IP protection anymore, because by the time, it's already, it's either they already figured out a way and make it better and moving forward already. So just before you talk about even protecting, your intellectual property, I think people now perhaps think about more about innovation. Think about, how do I get ahead? How do I continue to stay ahead? Because China is evolving so fast, and they learn it so quickly. So that's the thing. At least in Hong Kong, we do have the protection, but I'm just telling you the real truth is, a lot of time people figure out that, well, we might as well figure out another way to stay ahead, instead of talking about just preserving whatever is the right. The trade war, however, I think we all know that it's in no one's interest to get into a trade war. So we actually don't think this is the purpose of the trade war. We think that the trade war is actually is about negotiation, right? It's about bringing China and U.S. to some sort of further negotiation, rather than actually going to a trade war, because everyone lose. U.S. will lose just as much as China will lose. In fact, there's some calculation that perhaps the U.S. will lose even more. But in any case, no one wants to go into a trade war. But we are assuming that this is just the way that your administration wants to use to renegotiate some of the terms to exert better returns, which is fair. I think this is, I would say that China would do exactly the same thing too. But we all believe that it will come to some sort of an agreement and compromise.
Well, the reason I ask that is because I have clients, actually, U.S.-based clients, that have high technology, they have proprietary technology patents, they want to do business in China. The Chinese force them to go into a joint venture. At that point, then, the technology often gets exposed, but then because of the lack of rule of law, essentially the patents get violated, and then there's no recourse. And so what I'm curious about is there a way to use Hong Kong as a lever to say, you come in through Hong Kong, you got to play by our rules, we're not going to allow that, and here's the recourse that happens if there's violations of that?
Well, let me just give you one example. My company is currently now in a negotiation with a state-owned company in China of doing a joint venture in hospital. Because my company, Matthew know very well, is one of the most well-known hospital in the region, in Thailand. It's based in Thailand, and it's managed by our American colleagues. So right now we're in the due diligence, and similar issue came up, and we have decided to use Hong Kong as the governing law. But I tell you the truth, and I told my colleagues, so I'm not running the company, but I'm a shareholder of the company. I told them, because they always fear that once we go into joint venture in China, they will eventually learn the tricks and they'll do it their way. My answer to my colleagues from our hospital, I said, you bet, they will, right? They will.
But in Western countries,
But-
there's a recourse.
Well, let me.
It's called suing them.
Well, my problem is you can sue them, but you're not going to win, right? You're not going to win. So what I told my colleague is the only way to sustain, I mean, I'm sure the first 10 years, no problem. But if you continue to think that, well, we have this and we're not going to do anything, you're going to be partner with me forever, forget it. The only way that for us to stay ahead is continue to improve. That's continue, they need you. If you think that, oh, I'm just going to embed with China and then I'm going to be like doing nothing, they will learn fast, right? So my answer to my colleague, by the way, it's my company, right? I said, listen, we just have to be damn sure that we're going to continue to stay ahead of them, that they will continue to need us in that joint venture. Because complacency will definitely going to lose out to them. So you can have all the law to protect you, but I tell you, I personally would not think that you're going to stay competitive if you not continue to evolve and improve.
I was going to say, I wonder if pressure for strengthening of the rule of law will eventually come within China itself. So if we have highly innovative companies, they'll have their own intellectual property rights to defend from expropriation by rival firms. So I guess that would be one hope going forward.
When I say you don't win, meaning that you will be end up in a lawsuit and it will drag on forever. In the meantime, they will have another company that learned the tricks and will grab the market share while you continue to stuck in that whole legal mess. So my answer to that, if you just have to stay ahead, continuously stay ahead to make sure that they need you, continue to need you. I think that's probably more viable options. I've been told that we have to get out of here.
Unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to our moderator and our speaker. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Professor Marks. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. I invite you to refill your coffee, use the restrooms out in the lobby, and we'll get started in 2 or 3 minutes here with our next